Chapter 5 The Book of the Three Great Ladies. Turakina did not know what to do when Ogadai ceased to breathe. She lost no time in going to talk to Yeliu Chutsai. The Kakan no longer existed. How was the work of the throne to be carried on? The Kakan, who is now dead, he assured her, left a will. We can do nothing but conform to that. We cannot let strangers put their hands on the government now. Turakina had hoped he would say something else, but the iron in the Cathayan would not yield to a woman's dominance. Exasperated, the widow took counsel with her advisers, who reminded her that by Mongol custom the first wife of a dead chieftain cared for his people and his possessions until his successor could be named. She herself was now head of Ogadai's house. Authority then rested in her hands. The empire, Chutsai objected, was the property of the dead Kakan. How can you own what was his? No longer, he pointed out, were the Mongols a clan, disposing only of their flocks and herds. The elder Mongols, the Sechens, and Bakaturs discussed the matter among themselves and petitioned Chagatai to take the throne seat, but the wild horse refused, feeling himself to be weak and aged. Moreover, Chagatai knew that Turakina held her right by tribal law. He agreed that, as the widow, she should rule until another was elected by the Kuriltai. Meanwhile, Abdurrahman, her Persian minister, opened his coffers to make gifts to the kinsmen of the Golden Family. To increase the gifts, Turakina issued a decree by which Abdurrahman became minister of the empire. With authority over Chutsai and other officials, she signed the decree with her handprint. Such orders cannot be executed, the Cathayan stormed. Does the imperial widow mean to reward my services of 25 years by death? He was inflexible in his determination, and Turakina had no wish to dispense with Chutsai, who had been with Genghis Khan and Subutai, a founder of the empire. Chutsai had devised a government for the Mongols by which they had grown wealthy, while the subject populations could still survive. He had joined the cities to the steppes in a new manner. So she praised him and treated him with respect. Then Chagatai, the maker of laws, died. Turakina felt herself more secure in her power. Abdurrahman made plans to double the taxation in spite of Chutsai's protests, and the Cathayan withdrew from the government, grieving. For the first time, a woman's hand guided the Mongol world. The woman was Turakina, unlovely except in the eyes of the dead Ogadai, and more than 60 years of age, but Turakina had the vitality of the steppe woman, who endured beyond the childbearing age. Moreover, she had matured before the years of the conquests. Like Ogadai, she had the instincts of a nomad, and she was a shrewd manager. She was wise, the chroniclers admit, and they add. She reigned according to her will. Being a woman, she had more than Ogadai's adaptability, because she could ride astride a horse for a day's journey. It did not seem to her that she should ride so like common people. She preferred to be carried in a state, which meant in a canopied sedan. She could sleep by a yurt fire of dried dung, but she chose to dwell in the Karakorum palace that had braziers and sleeping quilts upon a floor of stately tiling. She had a conviction that power was her due. Was she not head of the house of Ogadai? The Empress Dowager, ruler of the Golden Family. Even Chagatai had admitted that, and Turakina, lined and brown with the weather hardened by years of nomad strife, became more of an aristocrat than her husband. She had no patience with the frippery of singing girls and hot wine. She wanted security and power for the children of her body, the children who now formed in her thoughts the Golden Family. The outside populations, which she had never seen, were so many slaves to be made to labor for her family. Turakina had few misgivings and no inhibitions. She felt herself quite capable of directing the course of this new empire, founded in the saddle, which could not be governed from the saddle. Like other Mongols, Trakina was, at heart, what they considered to be a pagan. How are they pagans, not the Christians? Well, not Christian, basically, is what they mean, right? Which pagan and heathen to the Romans and Greeks, those sorts of terms had no connotation of religion. It was just material culture. Truly, she liked to have the desert priests officiate her outside her doorway. The bearded and dirty Nestorians of mid-Asia beat their plates and went through the dimly remembered ritual of the Mass, while the shamans of the forest people doctored the sick of the Golden Family with drums and invocations to the spirits of the upper air. But the practical Mongol grandmother remained incurious as to her own spirit life. I'm guessing Harold Lamb is a Protestant. Her main concern was her growing family. The bloodkin of the House of Ogadai had increased swiftly. Now that they were sheltered from the Siberian blizzards and gorged with food, the young men of the great house bred many sons. These were no longer killed off by the tribal feuds and hardships of the winter hunts. Even Kaidu, the reckless grandson, returned unscathed from the Western War, and these young men, with unlimited herds and lands of their own, increased the number of women they took to wife. Healthy young women who bred easily, being bound no longer to the toil of the yurt that had made Turakina's body lean and hard. Also, the returning warriors brought back with them sturdy Magyar women, slender Persians, and prattling, quick-witted Chinese. A youth like Kaidu had 4 sons already tumbling about the pavilions of his wives, and Mongols in middle age might have 40 sons. A certain nephew of Genghis Khan boasted of 100 children. They nicknamed him the Centenarian. Each boy, when he matured, demanded his own establishment with women and serving men, cattle, and land by tribal law. Then there were daughters to be given in marriage, and all of them hungry for the new wealth. Turakina, in this incredible prosperity of her family, provided marriage payments and estates for all her growing bloodkin. She discovered that it was possible to commandeer wealth in a similar way. If Turakina stamped a bit of Chinese paper with the state seal she had entrusted to Abdurrahman, strange merchants would appear to yield her with infinite respect 100 weights of silver and sacks of gold coins for such a scrap of paper. These gleanings of coins the Mongol dowager handed over to the throng of descendants that clustered about her knees. Then, too, by speaking a word to Abdurrahman, she could bestow an appanage on a grandson, miles of fertile land with villages of slave souls, ready to labor with plow and forge and silk loom. There was apparently no limitation on this wealth she could bestow through the arranging of Abdurrahman at the suggestion of her adroit confidant, the Persian Fatima. For Fatima, the chronicler relates, knew the secrets of the great princess. She did not bother now to consult Yaliu Chautsai, who had retired to his house in Karakorum. Chautsai still objected harshly to this easy acquisition of wealth by the house of Ogadai. The throne has bad counselors, he lamented. Avarice dominates the court. The public charges are sold. The prisons are full of honest men whose only crime was to object to the lawless grabbing of silver. In the 5th moon of the year of the dragon, Chautsai died of this grieving. He had served Genghis Khan, Ogadai, and Turakina for 30 years, and when his life's work was taken from him, he died. Do they mean the year starting in, like, February, like the Chinese? Abdurrahman's intimates hinted at Turakina that the man who had been the chief servant of the Khans for so many years would have wealth stored up in his house, and such wealth, they added, should be brought back into the house of Okadai. Tarakina hesitated. She who lived in awe only of the sultan of Genghis Khan had felt an abiding respect for the Ghanaian minister, but she had heard whisperings about the treasures stored in his home, and Tarakina was curious. She ordered Chiutsai's quarters to be searched. Abdur Rahman's agents found no treasures of the kind they sought. There was a little coined money, the dozen loots that had been Chiutsai's diversion, shelves of ancient manuscript books, and other volumes written in the Katayan's fine calligraphy, a collection of old coins, and several pieces of jasper, with inscriptions carved on stone and marble, nothing worthwhile to the searchers. One other woman Tarakina watched with jealous eyes, Siyurkuktiti Begi, also the widow of a son of Genghis Khan and head of a great house. No one was more comely to look upon than the Begi, who dressed herself so carefully in new fashions, who had refused out of modesty to take Kuyuk, Tarakina's eldest son, for a second husband. Siyurkuktiti Begi bowed her gleaming head to the Yasa. She was younger in years than Tarakina and obedient to all Tarakina's wishes, and she seemed to care for nothing except the education of her sons. Still, she thought that her sons were as much a part of the Golden Family as the sons of the house of Ogadai. She was the greatest woman in all the world, Rashid says of her. Since some of her children were very young when their father died, she made efforts to have them trained, and she taught them good ways, never letting trouble come between them. And after that, she kept the hearts of their ladies in friendship one for another, and she guarded as well the great chieftains and armies that they had received from Genghis Khan and Tului, just as the mother of Genghis Khan trained him when he was left a young child at the death of his father, and held the army together for him and led it until Genghis Khan grew strong and won his way to empire. Just so was Siyurkuktiti Begi. In the training of her children, they called her the princess because no other was like to her. When Tarakina had sent Kuyuk, her eldest, to win military fame with the Western Army under Subutai's wing, and no Mongol prince could hold the respect of the steppe dwellers unless he had led them in war. This other great lady also sent her eldest, Mangu, to the western regions. And Mangu came back with a brilliant record. He had led campaigns and taken cities. He slew and he looted, the elder Mongol said, and he took with his hand great grazing lands for us. Kuyuk had not distinguished himself by such feats. Moreover, Mangu had become the fast friend of the Sain Khan Batu, now master of Europe, while Kuyuk had quarreled with Sain Khan. Tarakina said nothing of her jealousy unless to the attentive Fatima, for the princess made no claim before the chieftains and Noyans that Mangu should be honored above Kuyuk.